Howdy everyone, and welcome to the cerealgeekTV YouTube channel. My name is James Eatock, and today I present to you something special. Last year I featured a lengthy 6-part interview with storyboard artist and writer Robert Lamb. I've known Rob since 1998 and he's always spoken very highly of the Filmation storyboard department, especially Vic Dal Chele, who was also the best man at Rob's wedding. Vic Dal Chele has worked in the animation industry from 1981 until, well, today. He's worked at Filmation, Marvel Productions, Geek, Hanna-Barbera, Warner Brothers, Disney, the list goes on. I've known Vic for over a decade now and he's an incredibly humble gentleman. I thought it would be fascinating for fans of this channel and animation in general to hear Vic talk about his time in the industry. This is the first part of the interview. Enjoy!
Hello, my name is Vic Dal Chele. I'm an animation professional for the last 40 plus years. I've worked on shows like He-Man, Fat Albert, She-Ra, Transformers, G.I. Joe, X-Men, Scooby-Doo, and many others. I'm going to start off by telling you the story of how I got into this business. Got to go way back to what inspired me. And what inspired me was not animation, but it was comic books. When I was a little kid, I liked Superman and Batman, and every once in a while, going to the grocery store, I'd get a comic book of Batman or Superman and look at that. But that didn't last too long. I would say a couple, 3 years of that, and it kind of faded out for a while. And then when I was like 10, I went down to the 7-Eleven store and looked at the spinner rack. And there I saw something that was totally new to me, The Amazing Spider-Man. I bought it, took it home, read it, and went head over heels in love with the character. And with that, I needed to find more. So I went back and I discovered there was this company called Marvel, and I looked for their insignia on comic books and started reading Fantastic Four and Iron Man and Thor, Daredevil. So all of the things that inspired me were the Marvel comics of the mid-1960s, late 1960s, and on. Artists like Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Gene Colan, John Buscema was a big influence on me, as Jim Steranko and others. So I lived on the West Coast. I lived in San Jose, and in those years, everything was produced in New York City. DC Comics and Marvel Comics were centered in New York City. So I wanted to be a comic book artist so bad. And man, did I study, a lot of study, and drawing after school, drawing during, summer breaks, every day for quite a few hours, with the help of books like Andrew Loomis's books and others. But the problem was that back in the olden days, there was no internet, and there really wasn't a way. I mean, FedEx was just barely getting started, and they were very expensive. So what I'm getting to is that at that time, if you wanted to break into comics, you had to go to or live near New York City for them to trust you with any kind of assignment. So I never really got the ability to afford to live for an extended amount of time in New York City. I kind of got married at a young age and already had my first child. So my focus was paying the rent and what everybody has to do. So I had to stay in San Jose, and I worked in many things. Truck drivers, also worked in Silicon Valley making electronics, and would draw still and draw away. And I also still loved comic books, and I actually eventually was part owner in a chain of comic book stores in the San Jose area. But I just still longed to be a comic book illustrator. I really just wanted to draw, to tell stories. I never wanted to be an artist to make artwork, to do a still life or to do someone's portrait or anything like that. That didn't interest me in the most. But I'd want to do somebody's portrait if it was part of telling a story. I'd want to do a still life if the still life figured some way into the story. So it was story that motivated me to be, to try to be as creative as I could be. So I'd go to conventions, and then I heard about the San Diego Con, and I'd go to it with friends. And one year, and the San Diego Con now is humongous beyond what it was then. Back then, it was just a regular auditorium-sized convention, not a mega sprawling convention center. But they had as you registered, they had a table with flyers on it promoting, other comic book shops, promoting fan magazines, and this one flyer kind of stuck out at me where it said, "We're looking for artists, Filmation Studios," and they had a booth to go set up and have them look at your portfolio. Of course, I didn't want to do that. I was too kind of shy. But my friend who was with me cajoled me into submitting my portfolio for them to evaluate. I went and I met with a fellow who became a mentor and a dear friend named Will Minio. And he talked with me, and he looked at my work in my portfolio, and he said that he wanted to give me a job. And I was floored by that, and thrilled. Unfortunately, that thrill didn't last too long, because his next question to me was, "Okay, where do you live?" And I told him I lived in San Jose. And of course, that would mean that I would have to come down and live in Los Angeles, then work at the studio. And he said, "Well, the thing is, we're in a crunch right now, and we really need extra help, and that's what we're looking for, but it's not going to last that long. And I really don't want to make you move down here for just a couple of months of work. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll call me in the early spring next year when the season starts up, and I'll see if I can get you in." Well, time passed. I went home, and time passed, and I did call him. And I didn't get the job right away, but what he said he would do was send me a Filmation storyboard test. And I would take the test and then bring it in and meet with him at the studio. So the test came in, and it was quite, there was a lot of material. They had actually made like an instruction manual about how to do storyboards for Filmation. And it was quite thick. It was quite thick binder full of materials that you read through, and then you took the test. So I boarded that out as best I could, following what I'd learned. and drove down to Los Angeles and had my meeting with Will, and he looked at what I had done, and he was, I guess he was, I'd have to ask him, but I got the impression that he wasn't quite sure that I'd done a good job. But he said, let me take this to the supervisor, Carl Gears, who was the supervisor for storyboards at Filmation at that time. And Filmation had little offices. They were 2-man offices, but really they were 1-man offices. But anyway, and the walls were pretty thin, so Carl Gears' office was next to Will's, so he went in there and I could kind of hear what they were saying. And I remember hearing Carl say, well, geez, this looks like we got a little Will Mineo, so he said, yeah, go ahead, let's give him a shot. So that's how I got my first job in animation, my first job as an artist. I was hired and I started to work on a series called Shazam, the one that is owned by DC. He's the one in the red costume with the cape. And so I started to work on that superhero show for Filmation, and we also worked on a show called Hero High. And that was my first job in animation. And that season we also, once we were done doing storyboards, they allowed us to go help on doing in-betweens for the animation on those shows. And so that extended our time at work by a couple of months. And then of course we were laid off. And the following year, we had the last union strike. The union struck to try to stop production from going overseas totally. And that caused us not to be able to work the following year. But what happened then was that I think we got notice from Filmation that they were hiring for a new syndicated show. And would I be interested in taking a test for that? And of course I said yes. So it's my introduction, first time I ever saw the character of He-Man. And I took the He-Man storyboard test, and I was told that I had scored the highest of everyone on the test. So they wanted to hire me right away because they were afraid some other studio like Hanna-Barbera or Ruby Spears or who knows who might hire me. So I started back to work at Filmation, and I was helping out doing rotoscoping for the stock system on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
To be continued.